Hello, let's take a look today at section 3 of chapter 21, the East Asia, excuse me, and Southeast Asia. We're going to be looking at the so-called Asian tigers, and hopefully we'll be in class be able to bring up to date on what's going on in some of these countries known as the Asian tigers today. So we're going to look at some topics like obviously this whole region is dominated by China today. How is that influenced? And why is Singapore a model of modern industrialization for Southeast Asia and East Asia today? And then, of course, how can we figure out the situation where Korea continues to be divided and is having still the North Korean living in abject poverty, and South Korea being, again, a model of industrialization and democracy in the region. The term Asian tigers refers to these countries of Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and South Korea. Of course, Hong Kong fairly recently has been reacquired by China, and although it's been guaranteed 100 years of free and democratic rule under China, it's an exception. It still has changed a bit of what's going on in Hong Kong, although it remains a center of commerce for the region of shipping and commerce, and is highly industrialized example, therefore called an Asian tiger. They became these newly industrialized countries throughout the 1960s, 70s, and now into the 80s. And despite the challenges of geography and of poverty and of different instabilities, these countries have been able to thrive economically. And the question then, historically, is why are other countries still mired in poverty, like neighboring Myanmar and other countries like this, where the people live on very, very small amount of income each month, compared to the high standard of living in the surrounding Asian tigers. They are different, of course, but they did follow similar roads to modernization. Of course, every country in the region is under large influence of China and the Confucius ethics. Critical to economic development, as we have learned, is investments in education, which all of these have highly advanced educational systems, and stable governments. Uh, of course, the Asian culture, as we've mentioned several times, is under the sway of China. Taiwan, particularly, that we covered earlier, is an offshoot of China. The Chinese nationalists, led by Jiang Zemin, or Chiang Kai-shek, you could call him, and now the nationalists developed Taiwan today, and starting with light industrial, and now they develop many industrialized products. Britain, as we mentioned earlier, in 1997 has returned Hong Kong to China. Singapore is a model under Lee Kuan Yew, who is still viewed as the father of modern Singapore today. In Singapore, it's a very modern free market economy where it's very simple, very little red tape is needed to express economic freedoms. There's less regulation, and this attracts foreign capital, stable governments. Other countries want to pour their money into it if they see a stable government, and free market economy. So this expanded Singapore into the city that we know today. And they take on many skilled immigrants, insisting on education, bringing in tax breaks and other things to attract industry. Korea is a different story. We'll be studying the Korean War in depth, but after the Korean War, which was ended when in a truce, so it's really still going on, but it's on a truce right now, leaving it divided in half at the 38th parallel, or the so-called DMZ, or demilitarized zone. So the DMZ still exists today. America has 20,000 troops in South Korea, helping to protect that border with North Korea. North Korea is under strict communist dictatorial leadership, and the people live in abject poverty, whereas almost every penny goes towards the Communist Party. So during the Korean War, the Soviet-backed North, of course, with arms and help, and the United States actively fought in South Korea and pushed into North Korea all the way up to the China, where there was a dispute with MacArthur and Truman, and he was fired for the wanting to go into China to win the Korean War. So we ended up with a truce, like we talked, in 2 Koreas today. So the armistice or the ceasefire is still going on. There are times when hostilities occur where one side or the other shows aggression towards the other. So these things are still monitored today. It's still a hot spot, and there's no real plan for unification. There has been some discussion back and forth, diplomatic niceties occasionally, but then those don't last very long. South Korea has, like I said, becoming an Asian tiger then as a model of financial success. Even with some ups and downs and recessions, it's moving successfully towards democracy. On the other hand, North Korea, under Kim Il-sung first, the father of the communist North Korea, and then his son Kim Jong-il, and now Kim Jong-un, in December of 2011, so a few years now already, the young son of Kim Jong-il took power, a young man named Kim Jong-un, who we weren't sure much about him, but he has continued the aggressive posturing against the United States and other democratic, and continues to strive to develop nuclear weapons, just like his father Kim Jong-il did. And so this is a very important issue facing that region as well as the whole world. Oftentimes, Kim Jong-il and now Kim Jong-un uses their threat of nuclear development to try to get the world to give them more aid so they can feed their people. And that oftentimes is a bribe to keep them involved. So we will discuss more of this later.